Right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Community Energy Conversations Spring Series. I'm Duncan Law. I'm the acting co-chief executive of Community Energy England. That's quite a mouthful. Thank you so much for joining us. We're very grateful for your support, and we hope you'll find today's event is interesting and informative and stimulating. We've got a great panel of experienced people. That's whether you're an existing community energy practitioner or a stakeholder, or just getting started, or whether you're just here to learn what community energy is all about. And if we have council people here, you too are most welcome, and we really value your input too. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, Community Energy England is the membership network and representative body for community-led and owned energy organisations around the country, around England. We exist to help community energy organisations connect with each other, overcome barriers and share learning, hence today. We also advocate on behalf of the sector with a strong track record of reaching central government. Not that they act on our recommendations very often. The Spring Series is kindly sponsored by Unity, as you'll have seen in the opening slide, YOUNIT .coop. Unity was created as a partnership between Co-op Energy and Octopus Energy, and is a well-known organisation providing services and support to the community energy sector by buying the energy we produce, providing a community power tariff, which you can all sign up to, and even a Powering Communities Fund. Thank you, Unity. Today's event is the second of 3 virtual events that we're hosting as part of the Spring Series. And in a few minutes, I will give you a policy and advocacy update, and then I'll hand over to Kate Gilmartin, who is chairing today's panel discussion. But first, I must do a few bits of housekeeping for the event. So please do use the chat function to ask questions or to share what you found useful or anything polite. Behind the scenes today, we've got Charlotte, who's driving the Zoom, Flora, who will be keeping an eye on the chat and collating the questions for the question and answer session after the break, Kim, who will be driving the presentations, and Shannon, who will be tweeting throughout the event. And we'll be recording the session, as you've seen, in case you miss anything or for the benefit of those who couldn't make it. If you'd like to ask a question verbally, please just put a Q at the beginning of your question and we'll endeavour to give you that opportunity. We built in plenty of time for questions during today's event. We'll hear from our panel, and then there's a discussion, and then we'll take a break for 10 minutes at around 11:10, so you can all grab a cup of tea before we return for the panel question and answer. We expect to finish at noon, and we will try our best to keep to time. So before I hand over to Kate, I want to give you a quick policy and advocacy update as to why we're doing this event, why we think it's important. So you will remember the Net Zero Strategy, October 2021, omitted a plan or practical support measures for community energy, but did speak of empowering local leaders and a lot about the importance of local climate action. Unfortunately, they seem to mean only local government leaders, with nearly all the funding and support channeled via local authorities, which it deemed best placed to integrate activity on the ground so that action on climate change also delivers wider benefits. We would say we deliver benefits too. The Levelling Up White Paper, February 2022, also mentioned empowering local leaders. Michael Gove said, "This country won't achieve its full potential until every individual and community achieves everything of which they are capable. We need to fire up every resource we have." We agree. But it also directed all its funding via local authorities. The Rural Community Energy Fund, the last dedicated support for community energy from central government, ended on the 31st of March 2022, and ministers advise us repeatedly to work closely with our local authorities to support the development of community energy projects within the UK-wide growth funding schemes, such as the Levelling Up Fund and the Shared Prosperity Fund, and a number of others. These and most of the funding for net zero will be channeled through local authorities and will amount to several billions of pounds. Now, we're really pleased that the importance of local climate action is recognised and that local communities can now devise their own levelling up projects and others and net zero projects. But it's a pity that the funding is still judged by and distributed from Whitehall. That's not the way it should be. Local authorities, of course, are hugely important. They control large amounts of infrastructure and assets and have a democratic remit, but community energy is an essential complement. It enjoys more trust, often has more local knowledge, a longer memory, can mobilize human and money capital to deliver projects that otherwise simply wouldn't happen. Working in partnership with the local authority is not always easy, but is now definitely worth doing and of demonstrable mutual benefit. Yesterday, we shared with you a database of mostly central government funds that may be useful to community energy groups who can build constructive relationships with their local authorities. Many of them require consultations with and even partnerships with communities and businesses. You can access it via a bit.ly link, bit.ly/CEE-gov-funds. And I hope that will go into the chat in a little while. So briefly, I'll mention a couple of these funds. The Levelling Up Fund, round 2, provides capital funding for transport, regeneration, and culture and heritage projects. Those are the 3 themes, but it has a net zero requirement. So even if the local authority's bid is targeting culture, community energy organisations may be indispensable partners to deliver the net zero aspect, putting a heat pump or an energy efficiency measures onto a refurbished theatre, for example. The prospectus for the fund and the list of eligible local authorities is linked in our database, so go there and play. The precursor of the Levelling Up Fund, the Towns Fund, awarded 26 million to Glastonbury Town, as ministers have told us several times, 2 million of which will be going towards community energy development in the town. I hope Paul Phare will maybe speak to that in a while. Whilst obviously we're grateful for that capital funding, we have pointed out to government that had that 2 million been channeled through the RCEF, the Rural Community Energy Fund, or equivalent, it could have mobilised nearly 140 million of community investment. So we know where we put our eggs. The Shared Prosperity Fund is a mix of revenue and capital funding to replace previous EU funding, again funneled through local authorities. It has a mission to leverage at least twice as much private funding over the long term to stimulate innovation and productivity growth. I think they've missed a trick there. It encourages match funding so community energy can play a role there. The fund's place and community mission is to level up healthy life expectancy and well-being. With community energy fuel poverty work yielding at least a 9-to-1 social return on investment, we definitely have a role to play there. Many of BEIS's net zero funds for retrofit, heat, and other purposes are also funneled through local authorities. The Sustainable Housing Decarbonisation Fund and the Home Upgrade Grant Scheme, or HUG3, are worth between them 1.2 billion, launch in August and close in October. We've been recommended that community energy has a key role to play in delivering energy advice and energy efficiency remediation for local authorities under that fund. They will require NEA energy awareness training to level 3, and CEE will be working to enable community energy organisations to build capacity to deliver this in the coming months and access that funding. If this is something you're interested in doing, please do contact us, d.law@communityenergyengland.org, and start building relationships with your community, with your local authority now. There's still much retrofit funding to come, as well as grants for heat pump installations and green heat networks. Strategic local area energy planning for the energy transition is also increasingly focused at local authority level. This is a paragraph given me by the Energy Systems Catapult, which is kind of spearheading local area energy planning. Commissioned by the UK Research Institution research institution, I think, Energy Systems Catapult are working with national government and key stakeholders involved in the UK's local energy transition to further develop local area energy planning, and will be publishing a new guidance framework on how LEAP, as they pronounce the acronym, should be implemented across regions and communities in the coming weeks. So we'll look out for that, and we hope community energy is embedded at the heart of that.
Hi, Duncan, sorry to interrupt. Are you sharing slides at the moment?
No, I'm not. I'm just talking.
Oh, sorry, right, okay, fine.
Just a talking head. So please take notes, but we'll follow up with some of this if that's of interest afterwards. Energy Systems Catapult are also working closely with community energy groups to ensure that they're a key part of the stakeholder engagement process on both current and future LEAPs. And this engagement has recently led to an opportunity for Energy Systems Catapult to tailor and develop a neighbourhood local energy plan for the primary substation area of a village in Oxfordshire, which will also provide the community with a plan for how to transition their area to a low carbon energy system. And they're also doing it with our assistance in North Yorkshire. So even government is coming to believe that local is where it's at. I hope I've convinced you that building working relationships with your local authority is worth doing. And I hope our panel will inspire, I'm sure our panel will inspire us further with their experience, with strategies and tips on building this relationship and roles we can play to complement the local authority. So now I hand over to Kate, who is from the Northeast Net Zero Hub RCEF team, and she will chair our wonderful panel of experts. Kate, thank you.
Thanks, Duncan. Yeah, I'm actually from the Northwest, but that's fine. Yeah, I'm Kate Gilmartin, and my background is renewable energy consultancy, but I've been involved in community energy for a number of years. I'm a founder member of Greater Manchester Community Renewables and a founder member of Community Energy England. I've worked alongside local authorities for a long time. I took my current role with the Northwest Net Zero Hub 2 years ago. I'm actually sat within Lancashire County Council, so I've had first-hand experience of working within a local authority. And there I've been delivering in the Northwest the Rural Community Energy Fund for the last 2 years. And it's worth noting that, as Duncan said, you know, the RCEF was a really great opportunity for communities to lead on projects and actually lead by example and show the local authority what net zero can be. And I think that's been really powerful. Certainly in the Northwest, we've got a lot of innovation and we're able to take those examples to the local authority and say, look what we're doing, this is really good. So I think, you know, the importance now, as Duncan's just said, around funding opportunities and that funding being channeled through the local authority means that the importance of developing those relationships with our local authorities are even more crucial. From my experience, I find that local authorities are very different. It's a bit of a postcode lottery. You know, you have different people with different skill sets. They have different objectives, different priorities, and of course different politics as well. So it's very, you know, it's a very kind of pick and mix around the country as to who you get to work with. And I think that's going to be important as we draw this experience out from the panelists, how they have managed to actually work and collaborate and try and build that relationship to lead to projects. I mean, I think it's also worth noting that obviously there is local authority funding coming through shared prosperity. There's been the Community Renewal Fund, there's the Levelling Up Fund. The timeframes of these are tight. So, for example, the Shared Prosperity Fund, an investment plan has to be done by the local authority, I think pretty much by July or August this year, which means that they've not got time to really think through and start to engage. So the idea of communities having ready-made projects that they can take to local authorities will be extremely beneficial for the local authority. So if you've already got one project underway or you want to expand a project, then it's a great opportunity to say, look what we've done, this is how we can expand that project, and this will fit within the Shared Prosperity Fund. So I think it's a good opportunity for community energy groups to kind of press on local authorities and show the work they've already done. I think there's also a really good opportunity for community energy groups to show how community energy can raise capital through community share offers, obviously, but also things like community municipal bonds. That's a great kind of dovetailing of local authority that would lead on a community municipal bond, but yet the community could drum up support and get people to invest in a community municipal bond. So I think that's a really good point to be taking to your local authorities. There are other funding streams here, and that's something that communities can lead on and push the envelope on, rather than kind of more passively just having to accept whatever the shared prosperity or levelling up fund. I think there's big scope to try and work with local credit unions. There's a lot of money sat in those credit unions. We've got community energy has got a tried and tested business model. Energy generation, whether it's heat or electricity, is a revenue earner, and that has a business case. And we should be pushing hard on those local regional community credit unions, and also bringing the local authority to the table in those conversations as well. One of the big gaps we've now got, now there's no RCEF, is that development finance, which is really, really key to getting projects through to planning. We know when a shovel-ready project is there, that it will get investment. People keep saying to me, there's a wall of private investment, and we know that we can get things funded once it's shovel-ready, but it's that high-risk development fund, which RCEF was really good at doing. Can we persuade credit unions to take on some of that risk? Can a community municipal bond take on some of that risk? Can the local authority underwrite some of that risk? So I think that's the questions we need to be taking to our local authorities. But yeah, let's move on to our panel, and just to say thank you very much to the panelists for your time today. And if I can introduce, we have Paul Phare, who's the development manager at Energy for All, and Rachel Moffat from Bristol Energy Network, Nicola Davidson from the director at MaidEnergy, and Ollie Pendered, who is a director at Community Energy South. So I'm going to pass over to each of the panelists to let them give a 5-minute intro. But within that introduction, if the panelists wouldn't mind just kind of highlighting what connections you've managed to attain within the local authority, and how have you cultivated that relationship and developed that relationship, and why have the local authority decided to work with you as a community energy group, and what do you think those positive outcomes have been? So Paul, if we're okay to start with you, are you okay to give a bit of intro and see if you can encapsulate some of those questions in your intro? Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Kate. Hi everyone, I'm Paul Phare from Energy for All, and if you don't know who we are, we're a social enterprise. We're a cooperative of community energy cooperatives, yeah, we've got around 32 organisations now that we're working with, of all different types of renewable energy and scales. So yes, thank you. To answer the question, so just a little bit of background of the project that I'm going to talk to you about. It's called Edinburgh Solar. It's a community benefit society that's put solar panels on roofs of about 30 buildings in the city, their schools, their community centres and leisure centres. And the project came about because I moved to Edinburgh, didn't know many people, thought I'd join a few local organisations to do my bit, found a good sort of green organisation that was trying to do good things in the city. And they'd already tried to do a couple of projects. They were just sort of reeling from having their planning permission refused for a single turbine on a water treatment site just on the outside of Edinburgh, which they were pinning their hopes on. So I sort of came to them when they were in a bit of a down phase. But the solar on roofs model was looking quite a positive model, certainly in England, where it had been done by Energy for All. On a couple of schools. So I said to the group, let's try a solar, let's try solar in Scotland, that's after the laughing. We looked at the model and, it did look like it could work. So yeah, we knocked on the door of the local authority, and they were interested, and they said, why don't you come and talk to the leader of the council? And I think what got us there really was it was a bit of luck, bit of serendipity, I guess, that the council had these 3 pledges, and one of them was community energy. They actually wanted to see something happening at the grassroots in the city. So we were kind of knocking on an open door. And we felt like we had to pitch. Well, we were pitching to the leader of the council, but at the end of the day, he just wanted it to happen. So he said to us, "We like your idea. What do you need from us?" And what he offered was one of the council officers. I think he worked in the housing department, maybe, or no, buildings and development, or something like that. Anyway, we had him as a resource to help us develop our idea, and then we also had Kate's just been telling us about the demise of RCEF, but in Scotland you've got CARES, which is their equivalent, and that allowed us to access some early stage development funding to look at the roofs. So, I mean, the council basically said, "What do you want?" We asked for 100 roofs. Could we have 100 roofs? We want them to be community-facing roofs. They gave us a list, and we used the CARES money to whittle those down to, I think it was 27 in the end, that looked like they were the good projects to put solar panels on. So it all happened. It took a while, I have to say. It was a struggle to get through the procurement issue because effectively the council would be purchasing electricity, and the contract hit some threshold that meant it had to go to public procurement. So we had to work with the council on that, and in the end we overcame it by offering a service level contract to the council, so it didn't have to go to procurement. Whether that was a good idea or not, we can maybe discuss later. And yeah, it took a while to get through. I have to say it was really hard work to get through all the various departments and the bureaucracy to try. And it took 2 years. What we thought was going to take 6 months took 2 years. But in the end, the outcome was solar panels on public buildings, which wouldn't have happened if the community didn't approach the council. And in fact, when it went to cabinet for approval, there was a faction within the council that said we should be doing this ourselves. Why are we giving this away to the community? And the leader of the council said, well, why haven't you done it then? And they had a vote, and they voted in favour to allow us to go ahead. And in terms of positive outcomes, it's all the positive outcomes you get from community energy. I mean, you know, we raised £2 million plus, mostly from people who live in Edinburgh. The AGMs are very well attended. People are very keen to see more panels on more roofs. The council came back to us again. You know, they could have gone and done it themselves, but they didn't. They came back to us for a second phase. So, yeah, positive outcomes all round. I think I'll leave it there.
That's great. Thanks so much for that, Paul. Yeah, great to hear such a positive outcome as well. And I think the key there was that you managed to get the leader on board straight away. Mm-hmm. And you know, it is thinking about who you can access within your local authority, who's going to have the drive and the motivation. But yeah, getting the politicians on board, I think is absolutely key, because they make this stuff happen. Rachel, would you like to introduce yourself, and also if you can give a bit of background as well about who you've tapped into in the local authority, and who you feel really kind of worked well with you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Rachel Moffat, and I'm from Bristol Energy Network. For anyone who doesn't know us, we're a CIC. We're involved in many different areas of community energy, from renewable generation projects to local retrofit skills development, lots of community engagement for the council, and fuel poverty work. So we design our work to help the citizens of Bristol move forward to something that I think is quite important in terms of relationship with the council, but it's the shared city goal of net zero by 2030. But we also specifically work and aim to engage with seldom heard communities by demonstrating the co-benefits of carbon reducing projects. So we're slightly different because we're an umbrella organisation representing lots of different members who are interested in community energy, from individuals to community organisations who don't have a focus on energy, through to CICs who fly in innovative technology. And we see one of our roles as being the connection between grassroots and policy. So I must admit, I've been with Bristol Energy Network for a couple of years now. So I've been in a very privileged position of being able to step in to great relationships that have already been built up. But in terms of the history of it all, the first sort of engagement that Ben had with the council was with Mark Leach, who was working in the sustainability team at Bristol City Council. And the relationship that built up there was absolutely fundamental, because Bristol City Council is an enormous, as many councils are, a very big structure. And he was able to help Ben navigate the council, find out who to talk to, who might be a more friendly ear to these projects. So it was a long journey building up those relationships, but it was about finding who will be the supporting parties throughout the sort of 10 years of building that relationship. Bristol Energy Network formalized in 2014 to become a CIC. And at that point, we also kind of shifted from being supported mainly by the sustainability team on the policy side of things to actually delivering things with the energy service team. So there was a bit of a shift. We are still supported by the sustainability team, but they actually came to a trusted place to trust us to deliver projects as well. So it has taken a while to understand what we do as a network as well. And but thanks to, we've had a lot of support from the community, from the energy service team, including some individuals with a real understanding of community energy. And it also took quite a time to understand the level of expertise that we have within our network, and that we're not just about we're not just a community engagement tool. There's also a lot of technical expertise and innovation within our network, and making sure that we can demonstrate that to the council and that they can rely on that. One of the big moments that I think was really helpful was Bristol Energy Network, along with some other stakeholders in the city, developed the Bristol Community Strategy for Energy in 2013. And I think that really helped the council focus the council on to convince the policy side of things, which led to being able to deliver on projects. I'll share that link with you, but it's been a very helpful. It was developed with the community, and it was really helpful in convincing the policy, the people who make the decisions on policy, that we were a good bet on that front. And then they were able to see us as a delivery partner and see and witness the really strong community relationships that we have, which the council just didn't have at that point. We also internally identified specific council priorities and made sure we demonstrated how community energy delivers on those, and aligning our project with what we knew the council wanted to deliver in areas such as public health and community development, and just really emphasizing and illustrating that community energy delivers on all of those things. Some other positive outcomes, the council now can gain access to communities where there's been a little bit of mistrust historically. The processes that we've taken have involved a lot of community asset mapping. So, all the assets that are already there, that the council often don't have the resource or capacity or time to do, or maybe just haven't thought about it from that angle. So we're able to do that and present that to the council. This is all culminated in we now actually have a partnership agreement with Bristol City Council. So they work with us as a trusted partner to develop new concepts and ideas. And that has been really great. You were talking about the development funding, and that chunk that is really missing out of a lot of funding streams. And having a partnership agreement has just given us a little bit of capacity and resource to be able to develop projects that otherwise would just not be delivered because of the development side of things. It bridges the gap between development and delivery.
That's great. Thanks so much, Rachel. I mean, that just really highlights the kind of long journey of building that relationship based on credibility and the ability to actually deliver and also highlighting to the local authority that, you know, as a community energy group, you have got a broad range of skill sets that actually you can complement them. And there isn't that kind of, I sometimes feel there's a bit of competition, and the local authorities might feel a bit, I don't know, so sometimes they don't quite get community energy, and they feel a bit overwhelmed by what the community is trying to say to them, and perhaps get a bit defensive as well. But that really shows that you've got a symbiotic relationship, and I think where Bristol's at shows that as well, that kind of journey, which is brilliant. So thanks very much, Rachel. I think we'll move on. Nicola, would you like to introduce yourself and also highlight these relationships that you've built? Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Nicola Davidson here, Director with MaidEnergy Community Benefit Society for 7 years. I also run a fundraising consultancy, CIC, with one of my MaidEnergy co-directors. And we actually deliver a fundraising service to the local authority, which is how our strong relationship with them emerged in the first place. I'm also a mentor in the Community Energy South Pathways programme, which brings my interests together really firmly in the area. At MaidEnergy, we have about £600,000 worth of rooftop solar assets across 7 sites. So we're fairly small, and those sites are schools, leisure facilities, and an arts centre. One of them is post feed-in tariff, which worked because it was both new and very large. And our most recent project was a ground source heat pump on a leisure centre, for which the local authority was a trustee in that organisation. And that project made use of both RCEF and the renewable heat incentive. We won the last, so it came together nicely. I'm not sure how well projects will come together in the future along that sort of scenario, but we hope to try and make something work. In terms of connections with the local authority, we had 2 councillors who knew us really well and an officer, and they promoted us throughout other departments. And the departments we developed strong links with after that were climate, because we were looking for opportunities proactively; property, because we were installing on maintained schools and leisure facilities. Next was leisure, as the occupier was to purchase the energy from us. And lastly, infrastructure, not needed from us necessarily, but they were interested to talk with us and at least know that we're there in the background as they start scoping potential of community-owned low-carbon solutions. We haven't progressed in that area, but they know about us and hopefully will be included in their plans as conversations go on. So why did the local authority decide to work with us? Well, years ago, they gave seed funding to us at MaidEnergy as a social enterprise. So we're a really good news story of money that they've put out into the community. We are problem solvers. They needed our solar to help them keep capital and energy costs down when their new build leisure centre reached budget levels. So they came to us and we provided a solution. So win-win. We've been able to bring RCEF funding into the area to catalyse our projects. We've attracted over 200 member investors and we've raised capital. So we've proven our ability and our capability over time. And lastly, it's important to us, I'm not sure how important it is to the local authority, I hope it is, but we're an example of democratic control, which is what local authorities should be all about. How did we cultivate our local authority relationship? We repeated the thank you for that initial seed funding and share investment. So whenever we talk about projects, we mentioned that it all came about from a good relationship with the local authority in the beginning. So it's a reminder, it's a positive reminder all the time. And in all of our communications, we always remain politically neutral. We would never let any of our directors would never say anything disparaging one colour or the other. And we regularly return to them with credible opportunities to resolve their pressure. They're under enormous pressure. I have worked in local authorities. I know the pressure from management and from the political side of things as well. They need solutions. And lastly, the important part has been being the stakeholder everyone wants to work with. We're a success story, we're collaborative, we're open, we're friendly. We've got to make sure that we are the ones that everyone wants to work with. And in terms of the positive outcomes, we received a £10,000 grant in 2015, which was the seed investment. We have received from them investment in our share offers, so they are members in their own right of our activity. They have helped cover some of the costs of the legal fees for our installation sites. They've shared some PR support on our share offers and launch events. And the last probable outcome is credibility. We've proved credible, so it's a win-win for them. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Nicola. I mean, I think what comes across there is the overall positivity of that relationship, and also the fact that the local authority obviously feels de-risked by working with you. You know, like you say, that you've taken a neutral stance, so they don't feel that the political jeopardy there. And also, obviously, you've taken that seed funding and you've multiplied it, which is a great news story. So I think that's really important, that trying to make that relationship really positive and symbiotic as well. I mean, a lot of local authorities feel the critique from community energy because it's like, you're not doing enough, you need to do more, and that can be sometimes counterproductive. So I think that's a really good example of a good positive working relationship. So thanks very much for that, Nicola. Last but not least, Ollie, are you able to do an introduction and just give your experience of working with local authorities, please?
Thanks, Kate. How wonderful to follow the other guys, and Nicola and Rachel. Brilliant to hear what you're doing. I'm Ollie Pendered. I'm from Community Energy South. We are an umbrella network that supports the growth of community energy across the southeast of England, and we run a Pathways programme where we mentor community energy groups and build bridges with local authorities. So 3 years ago, Essex County Council came to us and said, we've got no community energy in Essex, can you help? And so we established the Pathways programme to do that. And Essex County Council now have 4 growing community energy groups, and we build a network with them to work with the local authority. And that's embedded in Essex County Council's strategy and their climate change strategy. We're doing the same with Surrey County Council, and Nicola from MaidEnergy is supporting us with that and having lots of conversations with new groups across the county and existing groups as well. And in Hampshire, we have 5 community energy groups who are growing, and one really exciting group that we're supporting is called Energise South Downs, who were registered as a co-op in the last few days. And what they've done, they are built around Petersfield, around a climate action network. And what they are doing is they are looking at a 50,000 population or thereabout as their outreach as a community energy group, and building their business plan and strategy around that. And that's really important, I think, for market towns in rural areas that previously have benefited from RCEF, but are now really looking to embed themselves as a community energy group and catch up with all the existing groups that are 10 years, in the making and doing so well. And that's important for building those relationships with the local authorities. We're also working with South Downs National Park Authority that cover 3 local authority areas. They're the newest national park in the country. We've just helped them issue their new TAN, their strategic planning notice around renewables that embeds community energy in their planning around sustainable energy, which is really important because it gives communities on the front foot. And then district councils as well, Uttlesford, Lewis, Winchester, and Tess Valley and East Hants. So we're also working with them to basically embed community energy into their policies and their climate strategies. So to do that, we've built relationships with the climate change teams within the local authorities. So nearly all local authorities now have a climate change officer, and they're at first point of contact. And that's really important because they've been employed because the council have done a climate emergency, and they've also got a climate change strategy that should include community energy. And if it's not, we need to build that in. So that's where Community Energy South comes in. We represent the community energy groups in a local authority area as one voice with the local authority, so they can really get behind it. And then the community energy groups can get on with their work and collaboratively work with the council. So there's one other area that Duncan and the team asked me to mention, and that's the other teams we work with the local authorities. I think it's really important to mention the economic development teams within the county councils and the larger authorities, because it's them that the levelling up funds and the shared prosperity funds will land on their tables to deal with, and they will then reach out to the council strategies and key strategies of the local authority to then embed them in future funding offers that come from decentralized funds that are so important. So it's the economic development teams that need to know about community energy as well. And I think that's really important. Local authorities are working with Community Energy South in our Pathways programme because we bring the community energy network in a local authority together, and we've developed steering groups in local authority areas as well, which the local authority can sit on. So on a 6 weekly basis, they get to sit with all the community energy groups and share what's going on. And I think that's really important as well. I just wanted to mention one of the groups in Hampshire, Energy Alton, who have been going for 10 years and they have awards. They're an amazing volunteer group. They have a powering up and a powering down strategy, which, you know, is just wonderful, the way they put it across and communicate it. And the council love hearing about it. And that's really important, that as well as new groups developing pipelines that the local authorities can own and understand and agree to and also support, the community energy groups are also developing powering down strategies, so doing energy advice and embedding energy champions. And we have this kind of nirvana, you know, sort of aspiration that every new community energy group and existing community energy group will have a paid officer that is their climate and energy champion, that is coordinating all the energy advice services and also supporting the pipelines. And that they are supporting the volunteers and the co-ops. So that's really important that we get that message across to local authorities, because they then in turn become a resource for the local authorities. And that's important. I think Kate mentioned it earlier. Local authorities have got a lot to do for their climate emergencies and meet their net zero projects. And the community energy sector are a resource in that. And we're there, we're trusted, we're embedded in the authority. Trust. Rachel mentioned mistrust historically between local authorities and community energy groups. And that's because we're all activists to begin with. And we pushed and pulled and gone down into those valley of deaths. Building those bridges with local authorities now, you know, and working alongside them as a trusted partner is really important, so that we do get to net zero, and that's what this is all about. And I think that's about it for me. There was with local authorities, just going to say one thing. I drew a triangle, but actually it's a square. So there's local authorities, there's BEIS, net zero team, also the net zero hubs, which Kate works in, and also the community energy sector. So we should all be working together in one direction. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Ollie. And I think what you've really highlighted there is that kind of ambition to expand and to grow those networks, and for those networks to be points of information that local authorities can draw on. And I think it's worth noting that, I mean, most people in the community energy sector, I mean, it's a big generalism here, but the knowledge in the community energy sector is probably greater than the knowledge within local authorities. And I think some local authorities that are further behind on their journey can be intimidated by the fact that people in their communities know more about net zero than they do. And again, it is about coming to local authorities and saying, look, we're in this together. There's a lot of knowledge out there on the ground, a lot of motivation. embrace that community and work with them to our kind of our joint ambitions. I'd just like to kind of throw this open to the panel for questions now. And one question I think is really around local authorities, and we've talked about the Levelling Up Fund and the Shared Prosperity Fund, and I'm just interested to know, you know, what are your ambitions to work with your local authority, or your pathways or your process to work with your local authority to access that funding? Because we've already mentioned timeline for shared prosperity investment plans quite tight. Has anybody made progress on that at all? I'll just throw that open.
Yeah, so Energy for All is working with Avalon Community Energy, who are a community energy BenCom based down in Glastonbury. So they applied for the Towns Fund, or I think the local authority put together a package of projects and applied to the Towns Fund, of which the Clean Energy Programme is part of. And that was an already existing established group that had already done some projects, had already done some solar panel projects. And they saw the Towns Fund as an opportunity to get a larger scale project funded. And what they've received from the Towns Fund is a grant to do the development stage, the early stage development. Now that's what afforded to bring Energy for All in. We tendered for the we went for the tender and won it with Locogen, a consultancy, and so that first stage of development is underway at the moment, and that was to identify a larger scale project, something, you know, a good sort of solid, robust business that could then generate a community benefit that could deliver on all sorts of other social outcomes in Glastonbury. So yeah, it's an interesting approach. It's very different to RCEF. You have, you know, you work with your local authority for a start. You get you get the sign off from government, I guess. You do your investigation, and then you have to then put your business plan back to government through the Green Book, and then they decide whether or not your project is going to be worthy of the capital grants that could then come along. And Glastonbury has identified a 10 megawatt solar farm within the Towns Fund boundary, and they're requesting £2 million capital grant to enable the community benefit over the lifetime of the project, which is some 4 million. No, what was it? Anyway, it's in the order of millions of return over 20 odd years.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Ollie, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, just to unmute myself. Yeah, I was going to say as well, that's a great example, Paul, you know, that we should all be looking at for the towns funds and things like that, because I've had a discussion with a few towns, the energy officers or the climate change officers, and they weren't actually aware of the towns fund and where that sits within their own strategies. And that's where it's their economic development teams that they need to be speaking to. So, and that's great. It's a great example, the Glastonbury one. And Duncan will reiterate that the energy minister quoted that a number of times and used it as an example for all of us to look at. It's just to let you know as well that Community Energy South have been involved with 3 community renewal funds, which are kind of preempters to the Levelling Up funds and Shared Prosperity funds. And that's where we're supporting community energy networks within local authorities. So one of those is in Hampshire, who saw the opportunity that aligned with their strategy, and they put in a bid through the Community Renewal Fund.
Great, thanks, Ollie. I mean, I suppose one of the questions is for groups or for areas where the local authority local authorities aren't as au fait with community energy, how can we draw on the examples from, progressed relationships like Bristol, for example, and how can we kind of replicate those with local authorities and community groups that aren't so advanced, especially when we're talking about shared prosperity fund, levelling up fund, business planning. It's kind of very complicated funding mechanism, unlike RCEF. Is there any support, do you think, that Community Energy England can give, or is there any support from other groups that might be able to help to facilitate that at all? I'll throw that open again. Nicola.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there is a lot that Community Energy England could do to support in this area. You could help the community energy groups to be creative in accessing those funds locally. For us in Windsor and Maidenhead, it's hard for us to access levelling up money as it's largely prioritised elsewhere. Of course, there is opportunity, but creativity is what we need. And I think supporting us to support councils to access government grants, public sector decarbonisation scheme, for example, how to partner for community bonds, how to divert pension fund investment, disseminate flexible home improvement loans with community groups as trusted, impartial representatives, and persuading councils to see community energy investment as alternatives to private sector investment. We need to get the investment organisations to understand the community energy sector too. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Nicola. That's great. And Rachel, do you want to come in there?
Just to follow up on what you were saying about support and help for community groups. I know that the Centre for Sustainable Energy in Bristol was running, who are a national charity, we're running mentorships for community energy groups starting out. And for example, my colleague Dave Tudgy is mentoring a group. I can't remember exactly where they are, but on the back of developing a wind turbine in Bristol for a community energy group. So there are, I think those are very much worth taking advantage of, because I know that, this turbine is absolutely brilliant, great good news story, but it was a very long, hard journey, and there's lots of lessons that have been learned on that and really useful information to share. Bristol Energy Network and Bristol City Council have they developed in 2019 a toolkit about developing relationship with your local authority. So I know that's been progressed with the catapult that Duncan mentioned earlier, but it's also a really useful resource. I'll pop that in the chat, just with general advice and information about how to strengthen and build those relationships and approach funding.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rachel. You both just touched on the fact that, community energy historically is very active and it's not a passive thing. And it feels at the moment with the shift in funding that we're in a passive role by looking at funding streams that we can't access as groups individually. We have to build those relationships before we can access that. But we did mention earlier as well, you just mentioned, Nicola, community municipal bonds and the idea of pension funds and things like credit unions. I'm just thinking, what's your thought on collaboration across Community Energy England and the groups out there on how we can be actively seeking new streams of funding that we can then bring to local authorities? Paul, have you got any ideas on that? Or is it something else you'd like to come in on? Well, you're on mute, Paul.
Yeah, I was actually following up on the last point, because with the towns funds, with all these this money that's coming from the government now, it's competitive. So it's not just community energy competing with renewable energy or trying to apply for funding specifically for community energy. You're competing with all sorts of other priorities in the local area. So you do have to be more proactive, I think. I think community groups do have to, or we as a community energy sector have to start being more proactive with our local authorities, because a lot of them, they don't know about us. They don't know about community energy. So it's trying to get that communication over to them.
Yeah, no, thanks, Paul. And Ollie?
Oh yeah, I am on mute. No, I'm free. Good. Yeah, no, it's just to yeah, building those relationships with the local authorities is really important. I just want to say, with our work in Essex and Hampshire and in Surrey, they all now have energy funds, community funds. So Surrey County Council actually have a 2 million community fund pot for communities to access. So that's all projects, but within it, community energy has been embedded. So community groups can go there for seed funding. Same within Essex County Council, they've established a funding pot for communities, and community energy is in there, and all of our groups are benefiting from that. And I'm glad to say Nicola's helping with that and her team from a funding perspective. And I think that's important, that we do look, you know, through these relationships we built with local authorities, as well as establishing a network for the local authority that can advise them on community energy, that also the local authorities, we help them establish an energy fund for communities. And in Derbyshire, they've got a green entrepreneur fund, and also, yeah, we're hoping to work with the northeastern Yorkshire area to do the same as well in time.
Yes, that's right. Thanks, Ollie. Yeah, I mean, it's worth noting as well. I mean, north of Tyne have got a fund through their devolution package, and that's a low carbon fund, but is inclusive of community energy projects, and it's just working on a. I think it's I'm not sure how many tons of carbon per £1,000 you have to deliver. So it's a very flat metric, and it's agnostic as to who is applying, what type of entity is applying for the funding. And places like Cumbria, which are currently going through kind of a unitary rearrangement, and Lancashire as well, they might well find that there's potential for devolved funds that will have low carbon that communities can access. Sorry, Duncan, I think you are next.
Thank you. Yeah, all brilliant advice. The thing about being creative and coming to the councils with suggestions, I think, is absolutely key. And our funding resource has a few indicators of grounds on which you could approach the council. But the thing to do, I would say, is to go and read the prospectuses and the guidance documents for those two big funds, and pick out the stuff that you can supply to the council that they probably don't have an idea of how to do otherwise. Community outreach, improving local infrastructure, and then go to them with all these bullet points, which they're going to have to hit to the government to win the bid, and say, we can strengthen your bid. We can do this bit. Just give us a share of the project, allow us to be nested within it, and we will help you hit this. We will provide the stuff that will evidence to the government that you can hit this this policy aim out of the funding. And that is they're going to be so grateful and so relieved, and see you as an ally in strengthening the bid. And I think that's how, one of the ways you can start, by being creative. And if you come up with those brilliant bullet points, some of which we've put in our spreadsheet, please supply them back to us so that we can strengthen the material that we supply to groups to help them be creative.
Thanks for that, Duncan. Absolutely. I think, Rachel, you're next.
Well, just a similar thing about sort of strengthening the bid, but also to consider sort of other streams of funding, for example, lottery. In Bristol, we've got the community climate action plans. So these are community groups who have developed a climate action plans from lottery funding. And I think that's a great resource, as well as, don't forget about the established amazing community groups, the community organizations that don't have a focus on energy, that already exist, and go to them and see what out of there could you support. How could you make their bid stronger for their community development plans? Have they thought about community energy within that? A lot of them haven't at the moment. You know, there's a lot of community organizations might have a development plan, but just haven't had the expertise or the time to think about energy. So it's something that you can bring and support in that. We're supporting groups across Bristol and will be supporting the sort of the next stage of it. So at first the first level was just the general emphasis and development of the plans, and now they need some delivery help. So that's where we can step in and start helping there. So make use of those amazing assets that already exist.
Great, no, thanks, Rachel. I think it's all about reach as well, isn't it? You know, community energy groups have a really wide reach, much broader reach than often the local authorities have as well. Nicola, do you want to come in there?
Thank you. Yes, it was about where organisations like Community Energy England can support these pathways for local authorities. I think it's key to help them, considering that there can often be a high staff turnover in local authorities, really help them to understand and trust the community energy business model, simplify the language, help to get it taught in business studies lessons, encourage universities and chartered institutes to volunteer so that you spread that awareness and capability by people that they may trust. And I think local authorities often gather confidence from neighbouring authorities or authorities they might identify with similarly. So publicise more of those community energy, local authority relationships. And then support local authorities to build local area action plans, local energy action plans into the planning that they're already familiar with, of course, like neighbourhood plans and their climate action plans. And add to the scorecards on climate energy, climateemergency.uk, the progress they're making in greater detail, and use community energy groups which span across local authority borders, because that helps to bridge the link between local authorities who so often can work in their own geographic silo. I wanted to quickly touch on more tips on being the stakeholder that local authorities want to work with. Clearly, Rachel has said clue up on their pressures and targets. That's absolutely key. But they've got massive pressures in terms of adult social care and education, huge priorities. If we can take some of the pressure off of that by delivering against the net zero targets, they'll have more resources for doing those things. So emphasising that all the time is really important. And then having your statistics in hand, you know, that 30-second elevator pitch that we all talk about in fundraising, have those figures, come across people, talk to them about what you've achieved, know the figures in terms of the quantitative stuff. And then have a simple business plan so that you can see and others can see how you align with those stakeholders. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola. That's really helpful. I mean, just thinking as well in terms of just what you were saying and the current energy crisis and the cost of living crisis. How do you think community energy groups can talk to local authorities about alleviating that pressure within those council areas? Have you made any approaches to your local authority about this yet at all?
We have started a conversation because they are putting resources into climate emergency activity. We really want to get onto the board of the organisation they're creating. We want to influence it. We want to show how we have track records ourselves in what we've done, but also that we're well linked with the other organisations in the community energy network, and we can learn from them. And that the cooperative landscape is a very open and sharing place to be. We can very easily gather information and methodologies from other groups and adopt them without any competition. And so I think if we can build that into addressing the needs of people who might be high up on their adult social care priorities, then we can perhaps alleviate some of the financial pressures they're experiencing from the energy crisis, which then helps them.
Great. No, thank you, Nicola. Duncan, I think you had your hand up next.
I just wanted to say, we heard yesterday that the voluntary energy redress scheme, which was scheduled to start in February, has now been decided that the Energy Savings Trust will be administering it. The first round will come online within the next 2 weeks. There will be a webinar on the morning of the 10th of May. All of this will go out in the newsletter, but there is up to 8 million for co-ops and community benefit societies over the next year to do carbon reduction and innovation projects. So get your ducks in a line, look at the Energy Redress website, get ready to pre-register. There will be a window of only 4 weeks for that funding for the first round, but that's a way of getting projects already part funded that you can take to councils and say, you know, we are already levering in funding to help you do stuff.
Great, Duncan. And do you know what the maximum amount that people can apply for is? Is there a top end?
I think it's 250 grand. I think it starts at 20 and it's big. But yeah, read the guidelines. They're not going to change much. And the starting gun will be fired within 2 weeks.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Duncan. That's some good news to end on. We'll just have Ollie's question and then it will be time for tea break. So Ollie, do you want to fire away?
Yeah. So no, it's just on the point about climate emergency and providing energy advice. So I'm noticing a lot of groups and areas are developing energy champions that are providing that energy advice. And in Essex, we group funded for all of the groups to establish energy champions. So that was funded through Power Partners and UK Power Networks Community Fund. And I think that's important for every local authority area, that if all of the groups can come together and look at that service together. And we've got a working group within Community Energy England that are looking into that as well, the rescue packages, and also retrofit, which will come into the summer conference. But yeah, getting organised to support our communities is really important. And that provides that trusted service that we all want to provide. So
yes, yeah. Thanks for that, Ollie. I mean, I think all our minds are focused on the fact that fuel poverty is already an issue, but come autumn, it's going to be an enormous issue, and community energy groups are well placed to try and address that. But yeah, I think it's time for a cup of tea. So we're back here at 11:20 for the Q&A. If you'd like to put your videos off, and then when you're back at your desks, if you put them back on again so we know everyone's back, and enjoy a nice brew. Shannon's very kindly collated some of the questions. So I mean, actually, Duncan, your one to start with is quite a good one, about council bureaucracy and blocking, and what strategies, tactics, tips do you have to get around it? It's something that probably we should have picked up in the main panel. So I don't know whether Paul or Nicola, Rachel, I mean, what were your blockers and hurdles, and how did you find your way around them when working with a local authority?
I'll come in about the procurement, because that was definitely an interesting issue we had, and I think how we overcame it probably wasn't the right way, I think, on hindsight. But we decided to form this service level agreement with the council, which meant that we were prioritising some of the priorities that the council themselves had to deliver through the community benefit fund. So, you know, while that was like a nice, neat way of us not having to go out to tender, what I think now is that the council would have been better off tendering it and writing the tender in such a way that it weighted, you know, the benefits from the contract, you know, the social benefits of the contract were written and weighted into the procurement. Because you know, if any private companies or, you know, commercial businesses did apply for that tender, well, they probably wouldn't be interested, because you know, they wouldn't be interested in delivering social priorities where community energy is. So yeah, I definitely think that would have been a better approach. Yeah,
I think that's a really good plan, is actually be part of the competition, but you're different in what you're offering. So rather than try and circumvent issues that the local authority throw at you like that, then actually just embrace it and go, okay, well, we can be in competition, that's fine. Nicola, Rachel, did you have any big barriers that you had to try and circumvent like that?
So just talking again about my colleague's project with the wind turbine, I know that land agreement and financing and planning were challenging, and I think sort of just one piece of advice is doing your very best to try and get people from those departments, use the champions that you do have, the people who are your supporters, to try and encourage those people along to the really initial stages of planning for the whole project, if they have the time to get involved, and so that they can really understand it. Because a lot of people's jobs is to deliver the most amount of financial benefit for the council, which makes complete sense, and that is their job, that's their outcome. But if they can start learning about all the other benefits and sides of it, but if they can be there from the beginning rather than so that their role can soften as you go along, and instead of being the one to try and barter as best you can, they might actually have some kind of investment in it. I think that is a helpful thing to do. Difficult with people's time and capacity, but definitely worth trying.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. Just going back to the question, so for Ollie, there's a question from Simon Gibbon from Climate Action Stokesley and Villages. Ollie, where do local enterprise partnerships fit into your model?
Thanks, Simon. And Simon and I have been chatting in between as well. So it's really good to hear you out there, Simon. Local enterprise partnerships. So it's my view, and Kate may be able to clarify this, I'm sure, hopefully you will be able to, but I think the tide has turned slightly from local enterprise partnerships to the local authorities with devolved funding. And actually, the regional energy hubs represent the local enterprise partnerships as well. So they can kind of deal with the local enterprise partnerships for us, for one. Local enterprise partnerships will also have funding opportunities, I hope, and you need to engage with them. So in the Southeast, there's a Green Futures local enterprise partnerships working group, and we engage with them regularly. But actually, I find more and more that I end up back with the local authorities who sit on the local enterprise partnerships boards, and ultimately funding bids are going to be local authority based at the moment. So if that helps, so the local enterprise partnerships need to be aware of community energy, but it goes back to your local authorities, I think, and it changes just throughout the country. Brighton Energy Corp are just running the last of a European fund with Coast to Capital, local enterprise partnership. That's important. And yeah, I don't know if you had anything to add to that, Kate, where LEPs stand.
Yeah, as you said, Ollie, I mean, the Northwest Net Zero Hub, the board is made up from the local LEP areas and local authority. I always find that the LEPs are very business orientated, and they tend to leave the community stuff to local authorities, so they're not massively engaged with community energy. I have to say that with them being on the funding board for RCEF, it's been a great opportunity for them to see the projects that have come through, and to see the scale of the projects, and to see the variety of the projects, low carbon heat networks, 30 megawatt solar farms. So I think we've put a bit of a stake in the ground in the Northwest by saying, look, this is something that's should be seriously considered, and you should be aware of what the business model is and how many people it can engage, etc., etc. So yeah, do try pushing on those doors, and do try showing case studies. Out of interest, after COP26 or part of COP26, BEIS had funding for carbon copy case studies, and each region was tasked to collect or collate 125-ish case studies from around their area. And if you go on the Carbon Copy website, you'll see all those case studies. So things like that will have very much been under the noses of the LEPs, because it was broad across a region. So we managed to get quite a few community energy case studies in the Northwest in there. So it's all about kind of, showing those case studies and raising awareness, I think. Nicola, did you want to come in there? Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Picking up on the local enterprise partnerships, I think community energy groups are largely run by voluntary people who are doing it in their spare time. It's really hard to forge those links in a voluntary capacity, which does bring the importance of local authority relationships back even more. I think there's an opportunity to engage community energy groups in commercial and domestic building developments on a larger scale, which is where the infrastructure theme is so prominent on local enterprise partnerships. So if we can get those relationships with the local authorities to be reflected in the priorities of the LEPs, that could be really key. And as volunteers, we can't always be on every board that we want to be. So strategically, fix that relationship with the local authority, get them to raise your voice on the LEP boards, if we can. Yeah, no, great. Thanks, Nicola. Yeah, Ollie.
So I was just going to add two things. So before the net zero or the energy hubs were established, all of the local enterprise partnerships did an energy strategy. It's probably about 4 or 5 years ago now, and that was a chance to embed the seed of community energy in that. And what Kathy Smither said is quite right. Local enterprise partnerships are all about jobs, but they are also all about European funding, and that's going to come to an end in 2023. So the things are shifting a little bit. And the other point I was going to say was, if you do want to get involved, have a look at the stakeholders, have a look at who's on the local enterprise partnership, you know, from your local authority. The chances it's the leader of your council is on, and maybe target them as, you know, if you want to lobby people. You know, don't go in at ground level, go in at the top. You're a community energy group and you represent a lot of people.
No, thanks for that, Ollie. And I think the scale of community energy factors in here as well. I mean, Ollie, you've obviously got the Community Heat project in Barkham, and obviously Swaffham Prior started off as a rural community energy fund project. That's taking a whole village off gas onto low carbon heat. Stithians in Cornwall is a Kenza project, so it's not community energy, but it's energy for the community. That's an ERDF funded project called Heat the Streets. It's well worth a look. And in the Northwest, we're doing an RSF funded project with Chipping Village, which was a copycat project of Swaffham, but we've pivoted and we're now following in the path of Stithians in Cornwall. So again, off gas grid village, looking at taking the whole village off oil in one go. And I think that scale is really important, and that's where community energy sits. When you think about low carbon heat, you know, historically the government has supported district heat networks, which is city centre, high density of industry areas, for example, and maybe some housing on the periphery of that, and then individual homes. And they've missed this chunk out in the middle, which is about community. And you think of all the terrace streets where air source heat pumps are not going to be appropriate at all. We need to look at cluster solutions, and that's going to be very much driven by communities at street level. For example, in Chipping, 6-strong working group there who've got so much credibility, and it will be them that talk their neighbours and their friends within the village into uptaking this new ambient loop heat cluster or whatever. So I think that's a really important point, that community energy is increasing in its scale of delivery, and we should be telling the LEPs about that, because that's all about job creation and big investment as well. Thank you all for that. I think there's a question here from Robert Sherman at Harbury Energy Initiative. Robert, do you want to just come online and ask that question? Or do you want me to ask it for you? I can ask it for you.
No, I'm coming.
Come on there.
I'm here. Yes, we've been working on a EV charging station idea, part powered by renewables, which we've had RCEF funding for up to stage 2, and we're just waiting to hear the results of our planning application at the moment. And we are working now with Warwickshire County Council. We spent a lot of time making friends there, and they came to us and said, well, there's this new Levi fund, the local, the low emissions vehicle infrastructure fund, which they are applying for with us and another community. But the sums of money, I mean, we're a village community group, right? So the sums of money involved are massive for us. We're talking for our bit of the project about 600 grand. And the minimum requirement of private funding is 20%, and they want us to try, and council wants to try and find 35%. That's a massive challenge, and we don't really know where to start.
Anybody from the panel got any advice for Robert on that? But yeah, great, sounds like a great project, Robert, and I appreciate the fact that that scale seems pretty enormous. Anybody got any advice on that? Go, Ollie. Rachel.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say it might be something to approach established co-ops about. I mean, you know, I'm thinking about the Bristol Energy Cooperative based in Bristol, but work nationally. Obviously, they generally are a generation project, but they're experts in crowdfunding, and I think that might be what to look for. Is you know, have a look nationally, because co-ops that crowdfund for certainly energy generation projects, which of course, it might be slightly different because it's a low emissions a project. But I think that would be a good thing to look through, is look at co-ops with crowdfunding experience and see whether or not you could get your project onto one of their portfolios, because they're very good at raising money.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Rachel. Thanks for that. Paul, have you got something to add?
Yeah, just to echo that, really, there's plenty of support organisations out there like Energy for All, and just to give you an example of how that really helps with the Edinburgh example, you know, whenever a local authority has to assess a bid for any kind of project or anything they're procuring, the organisation has to go through some sort of pre-qualification questionnaire, which requires you to have years of accounts and, you know, track record. And most community groups would stumble or wouldn't even make it past that stage. And actually, in the case of Edinburgh Solar, it was the partnership with Energy for All and, you know, the track record that Energy for All had developing other projects that really gave that organisation the credibility in the eyes of the council. So I can't stress how important that is in especially when you're doing a larger scale projects. You know, if you're doing something really ambitious, yeah, you can't beat having some track record on your side.
Paul, Ollie, did you want to come in as well?
Yeah, I agree with that, Paul. I was going to say for Harbury, Robert, the example that I've got is one. I was with Saffron Walden Community Energy this weekend. We did and Saffron Walden Town have got a £500,000 DEFRA air quality fund, which they brought in to make, you know, to research and develop better air quality within the market town, which I think is probably quite similar to Harbury in size. And what we're helping Saffron Walden Community Energy do is to build their outreach from 10,000 population or 3,000 out to 50,000, so that they bring in the villages and more governance into their co-op, but also their reach, because and all the parishes that use that town to travel into. So, and that helps with the air quality side. And also in South Downs, Petersfield is a similar example. So Petersfield Climate Action Network have developed Energise South Downs as a co-op, and they are looking to bring in their governance to cover an area of 50,000 population.
Brilliant, thanks, Ollie. I mean, it's just worth noting here that obviously car clubs, obviously Harbury have got the car club there, and there's lots of car club community energy groups looking at the potential to do EV car clubs, especially in rural areas. I'm certainly doing quite a lot in Cumbria on this. And I think what's interesting is some local authorities are using their fleet vehicles and offering them to the local population in the evenings and at the weekend. Certainly Lancaster are doing this as part of, I think they're doing it in conjunction with Co-Wheels. So they've started a car club, and then we're now working with them to try and expand that car club. So again, it's a really good example of where local authorities are perhaps nascent in something or having that idea, and then community energy groups can then work with them to either build on the seeds that they've already formed and expand that, or just share ideas on that. And it's also worth noting that Exeter, I think it's Co-Cars, actually their car club used a community benefit society and raised £600,000 to create that car club that's running there. So there's a real kind of affinity with community energy groups, community benefit societies, and EV car clubs, which is great to see at Harbury as well. Thanks very much for that, Robert. I think we've got a question from, where has it gone? From Adrian at Transition Stroud. Adrian, do you want to come on and ask that, or do you want me to give that a voice?
Yeah, thanks very much. It was just a comment really that we have got a levelling up fund bid which is being collated by the district council. I'm a town councillor as well. The town council have fed into that. It also requires county council input. But I was wondering whether other people have had either early stage proposals shared with them or open for public consultation, because ours is all being done behind closed doors, and the first site that will be seen of it is when it goes to Finance and Policy Committee for final sign-off ahead of being submitted. So it won't be available to public view until I think something like the 23rd of June. So just some ideas of whether other authorities are being a little more open and sharing would be good. Thank you.
That's a bit of a shame. Thanks for that, Adrian. But yeah, you know, that's not ideal, is it really? I mean, have you got some good links in with the council, or what's your relationship with what's your relationship with them like?
Not great. So we recently put a proposal forward for a scheme to improve the bus station in the main town that a developer had looked at. It's not a huge amount of work, but it's not costed. And effectively they've said, well, if it's not costed, we're not going to do it for you. So it's unlikely to be included.
Okay, yeah. I mean, Rachel, Nicola, have you got any input on that? Because obviously you've worked really closely with both your councils. Rachel, any tips?
It's a really good question. You know, I think the more transparency we can get on these kind of things, the better. Certainly with Bristol Energy Network, we do try, and as soon as we get wind of something like that in terms of a big bid, we do try and consult our members around it. So not necessarily the general public, but our network members, which any member of the general public can be. So that's something, but I do know that is something that councils tend to do, is keep things slightly under wraps on that front. But yeah, so I'm trying to think of an example right now, and I can't at the moment, but you know, we've tried to share as much as we can whenever we get any information from the council, and they are sometimes they're happy to share, sometimes they're a bit guarded about it. It depends on what kind of application they're putting together, but I would just keep pushing and asking, and the more people who ask, the better as well. So if you've got other member groups or connections who could ask about it, and or not necessarily ask in a I need to see this, but in a let's propose this, and just keep proposing to them, knowing that is happening, then that might be helpful. Great, thanks, Rachel. Nicola, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I echo what Rachel has said. It's really important and really hard. If I was in your position, I would have a go at drafting the bid myself, really loosely with bullet points, and offering it to them as a contribution, because that might open up their thinking on the answers and give you an opportunity for dialogue. So just something really simple, bullet points. Share it, ask if it helps, and then they might come back to you. It is a really good example of why feasibility study funding is needed, isn't it? So right, wherever that can come from.
Yeah, I mean, are you in touch with councillors and officers? I often think that the pincer movement's good, Adrian. So you go in at councillor level and officer level and try and squeeze.
Yeah, I think the original bid in the last round was unsuccessful, and I think because of that, and we've got a Tory marginal MP, I think they're really nervous about sharing too much information at this stage. But it just seems very sad. That's all.
Yeah. Thanks. Ollie, Paul, have you got anything to add on that at all? No. Yeah, Ollie.
Well, it's just really, you know, with this is about the Towns Fund. Sorry, I was like, yeah, about the Towns Funds, Adrian. No.
Levelling Up Fund.
Oh, the Levelling Up Fund. Yeah, I think maybe go back to your energy hub and ask them to help unlock it for you. Could be an option, because the energy hub should be involved. But they do need to hear your voice, and if you've got projects, then yeah.
Yeah, good shout. I mean, the levelling up is supposed to be all about people and places, and that will heavily involve engagement as well. I think part of the issue probably as well, Adrian, is that a lot of people don't really know what this funding is for and how it's going to be delivered. So there's been so much uncertainty about who's even delivering it. You know, Lancashire only found out, I think, a couple of months ago that it was going direct to districts, not to the county council. And then there's, you know, how much they're going to get. And so it's all been quite last minute. So it might be that they just haven't got the head around what it means, which in that case, you know, Nicola's advice about perhaps drafting them something might be quite welcome.
The only thing I would suggest is maybe getting in touch with Avalon Community Energy, who've been successful. I'm sure they'd be open to talking to you.
Yeah, good shout.
I would also add that if a bid has failed previously, they've actually got no excuse not to try all options, including involving the Community Energy Group. Referencing the Community Energy Group and that dialogue has happened in formulation of the bid should strengthen the bid, perhaps remind them of that.
Great. Thank you for that, everybody, and thanks for the question, Adrian. Just picking up at Kathy in the chat. Yeah, I think Swaffham Prior has been more expensive than they thought it was. It has had a lot of bad press. I think the Kenza project, the Heat the Streets project in Stithians in Cornwall, is an ambient heat loop. So it's not got an energy centre and it's cheaper to get the pipe work out there. So yeah, happy to pick up with you on those projects, actually, Kathy, if you want to have a chat about them.
Well, Kate, would you mind if I just said, I think it's the point I was trying to make is that it comes back to trust and getting potential customers to sign in and sign up to these things and commit to what is a hell of a long-term project is one of the more difficult aspects of heat. I mean, as some people know, we run Springbok, which is a heat project, but essentially we had one main customer, and once they signed up, the residents in that hamlet really had to fall in with it, if I'm honest. But getting individual consumers to sign to a social enterprise or even a partnership for long-term duration, I think is a pretty tough call.
Yeah, no, I agree. I can drop you an email about the Stithians project, Kathy, which is slightly different and it's slightly lower risk than kind of a higher temperature heat network. But we can
Kate, I've done one and we're still doing it. So we've got another 14 years to run on it. I mean, 7 years through and about 14 years to run. So thank you very much. Others may be interested, but I'm not doing another.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fine. Great. Okay, so I'd just like to say thanks to the panel, and would you be able to give us your kind of final thoughts, those last kind of nuggets of wisdom on where, you know, I think really key is where our relationships are going with local authorities. And as we said earlier, you know, we've got climate emergency, obviously. We've got an energy crisis, cost of living crisis, which is really kind of crystallized thinking. And it feels to me that local authorities aren't jumping on board with the idea that they have some power to help the citizens within their community to alleviate the crisis that's happening. You know, how do we get that message to local authorities that there are solutions out there, and there are cost-effective solutions out there that can be supported and implemented by community energy groups? I mean, how do we petition our local authorities? Have you got any final thoughts? Paul, do you want to go first?
I knew you were going to pick me first. Yeah, I think learn to have a lot of patience with local authorities. They're very bureaucratic. Everything has to go round and get signed off by so many departments before you can go ahead with anything. So understand the culture is, you know, it's quite frustrating, but I guess it's necessary with all the checks and balances they've got in place. The other thing, the buzzword going around at the moment is smart local energy systems. You know, everyone's talking about this joined up thinking idea where, you know, low energy is created in the local area, and you know, it's even talking about balancing locally and a collaboration between the private sector, the public sector, and communities. It's very academic, but it gets talked about a lot. You'll hear the buzzword or the acronym SLES quite a lot. And I just noticed yesterday that the Ofgem are doing a consultation on strategic development of energy in the local area. So I get this sense that this is the way it's going. You know, decentralization, localization, whatever you want to call it, to the power supply system. So yeah, just get engaged with that conversation, because I think it's going to be going on in everyone's local area.
Great, thanks, Paul. I did put a paper in the chat earlier, which is on multi-vector systems for community energy, and it's basically, SLES, and how everything's going to be interconnected, and how community energy groups can be at the focus of bringing all that together. Nicola, could you go next with your final thoughts, please?
Thank you. Yes, I think green jobs is going to be crucial. Everyone's talking about the need for more jobs. We can illustrate how our projects can support the development of that sector, why it's needed, the innovative ways that we can approach that, and provide case studies far and wide. I think giving case studies to local authorities of where projects have worked well is really important. A couple of ideas: invite certain officers to join your community energy group board. Then you can have that insider link potentially. I know the work we've been doing in Essex, there are a couple of officers who are interested in joining the boards of groups in their local areas, which I think is marvellous. And promoting the business model of community energy groups. That's really important, so that people widely understand it without it being overcomplicated. A lot of our share offer documents go out and they're hard to digest. Picking up on this Springbok project, for large projects which require a lot of investment and a long-term engagement, I think it's really key to engage a high number of people. And that's something Ollie mentioned about not just looking at a village project, but taking that out to a wider population, because then not only have you got a wider pool of potential volunteers, you've got a wider pool of investors. And that's quite often it's quite important to make the name of the energy group not unique to one small place, but make it broader rather than just the village. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, really helpful. Thank you, Nicola. Rachel, are you able to give your final thoughts, please?
Yeah, just very much to echo Nicola's suggestion about case studies. Everyone loves a good news story and an example of here's how it's done, let's replicate that. So very much on that front. And also I would say shaping discussions around fuel poverty. It's a massive crisis just now. It's only going to get worse, and there hasn't been central government support around it to the level that's required. So I think really, really illustrating how community energy can massively help on that front and benefit there, I think is helpful. In very much in energy reduction as well as just generation. So not just focusing on generating, but also on reducing behaviours and retrofit. And then finally, also that a lot of places over the country will have council elections coming up. So use that, if anyone comes knocking on your door to ask you to elect them, get them to commit to community energy in writing, publicize it, really put the pressure on politically, from a non-partisan perspective. But anyone who comes to your door, chew their ear about community energy and try and get them to commit to that, whilst illustrating all the benefits that it can provide.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rachel. And Ollie, have you any final thoughts, please?
Yeah, okay, so yeah, I agree with what everyone else is saying. Obviously, green jobs are really important. I personally like to see every community energy group in the country have a paid employee that's there for a whole year and is group funded or whatever, or paid by the local authority to coordinate this work in powering up and powering down, and scaling up the outreach and support that all the groups give. And then just another thing, if your community energy group is in a local authority that's not represented very well, come back to Community Energy South and we'll see if we can help you through the Pathways programme, and link in with the net zero team at Bays and see if we can unlock that. I think it's helpful to do that and go to your energy hubs for the same thing, use them, because they are now rebadged as net zero hubs to support you in all of this. So yeah, that's it really. Green jobs, I think, is really important.
Great, thanks, Ollie. And just, I'd like to say thanks very much to all the panel today for giving your time and your experience and expertise and sharing that. And I think that's what's really important about community energy, is that it is a really well-established network across the country of people who have thought long and hard about the solutions around net zero and are really passionate about all putting their shoulder to the wheel and actually sharing knowledge, expertise, advice, shortcuts, and moving in the same direction, shoulder against the wheel. And that's why we do want to collaborate with local authorities. We don't want to have conflict with them. We want to give them our ideas and our time and our resources. And we have got the ability to create business models and raise capital and to build momentum at grassroots. I'm working with lots of community energy groups across the Northwest. I've never seen such motivation and momentum at grassroots level, and people want solutions. We've got the solutions, like you say, there's case studies out there, there's loads of case studies. There's loads of forward thinking about where we need to go with SLARES, with low carbon heat, etc. And it's just about kind of creating that jigsaw and then sharing all this knowledge as well with the local authorities and with people on the ground. And I think community energy as well is great at engaging. It's a good news story. We've talked about that positivity. It can be very neutral. We can keep it apolitical. And it's great at bringing new recruits along as well, because people want solutions and we're able to say, well, here's a project that's successful. Okay, here's a project that's not successful, but here are the lessons that we've learned. So I think community energy as a whole has got so much to offer. And I really hope that you can all have taken this from the panelists today and the Q&A, and can carry on knocking on the doors of local authorities because they are open. Some are more open than others, but I think our offering is so strong that it's so, and local authorities are so stretched and they don't often have the solutions, that at some point they will realise that we've got a lot to offer and that we can really help them on their net zero journey. So yeah, thank you very much as well for inviting me, Community Energy England. I'll hand back to you, Duncan.
I should learn to unmute. Have I unmuted? Yes, successfully. Brilliant. Thank you, Kate, for brilliant summing, and thank you to all our wonderful panel. I found that very inspiring. I think the bringing the credible solutions, the emphasising the social benefit, especially in the energy crisis, and the benefit to applying for funding to central government that you can bring, and that lovely thing of being the stakeholder everyone most wants to work with. When your email arrives, people go, oh yes, I'll deal with that first. That's going to win you loads. On the social benefit in the energy crisis, I re-emphasise that we will be working to try and enable community energy groups to engage with the funding streams which they can get access to do that work in the autumn. If you're interested, please contact us. So back to the thank you, and especially to Kate for a wonderful chairpersonship. Any resources that have been shared during the event will be made available afterwards, and the recording will be on YouTube pretty soon. Just enough time to tell you that our spring series has one more event on Thursday, the 5th of May, which is a conversation about the future of the sector. And if you haven't signed up, please do tell your friends and colleagues. It's through the Eventbrite that you signed up to this one, and there was a reminder in the email we sent yesterday. We also have the Energy Transitions Summer Conference, our main event of the year, great networking opportunity, on the 18th of June. It's in the middle of Community Energy Fortnight, and we're co-organising this with the Bristol Energy Network in Bristol, face-to-face, and we'll encourage as many people as possible to come. We'll be announcing the event very soon, and bookings will be open next week, so watch out our newsletter coming out on Friday. If you're not a member of Community Energy England, we would encourage you to do so. If you're an early stage group, then you will not necessarily have to, you probably won't have to pay any kind of fee to join, but you will get huge amounts of benefit which enable you to grow. We'll be running a number of local authority themed workshops and sessions during the summer conference, and we'll be inviting local authority people. The workshops will be recorded so you can share them with your local authority colleagues after the conference. And to wrap up, I'd just like to thank you all for attending today's event, and we'll hopefully see you next Thursday for the final Spring Series event. And meanwhile, go well and get in with those local authorities. There's lots to gain for both of you. Thanks again. Bye-bye.